Welcome back to learn intermediate JavaScript on Codecademy. We're in the JavaScript promises section. This is the node setTimeout function. Knowing how to construct a promise is useful, but most of the time knowing how to consume or use promises will be key. Rather than constructing promises, you'll be handling promise objects returned to you as a result of an asynchronous operation. These promises will start off pending, but settle eventually. Moving forward, we'll be simulating this by providing you with functions that return promises which settle after some time. To accomplish this, we'll be using setTimeout. setTimeout is a Node API. A comparable API is provided by web browsers that uses callback functions to schedule tasks to be performed after a delay. setTimeout has two parameters, a callback function and a delay in milliseconds. Here we have const delayed hello is assigned this function, which has no parameter and will log, hi, this is an asynchronous greeting. We then have setTimeout and we pass in delayed hello with 2000 milliseconds provided. Here we invoke setTimeout with the callback function delayed hello and 2000. In at least 2 seconds, delayed hello will be invoked. But why is it at least 2 seconds and not exactly 2 seconds? This delay is performed asynchronously. The rest of our program won't stop executing during the delay. Asynchronous JavaScript uses something called the event loop. After 2 seconds, delayed hello is added to a line of code waiting to be run. Before it can run, any asynchronous code from the program will run. Next, any code in front of it in the line will run. This means it might be more than 2 seconds before delayed hello is actually executed. Let's look at how we'll be using setTimeout to construct asynchronous promises. Here we have const return promise function is this function with no parameter, and it returns a new promise with this function which takes resolve and reject, and it does setTimeout. For 1 second it is delayed, and then we will resolve with I resolved. Here we have const prom is assigned return promise function. In the example code, we invoke return promise function, which returned a promise. We assign that promise to the variable prom. Similar to the asynchronous promises you may encounter in production, prom will initially have a status of pending. Let's explore setTimeout a bit more. Our instructions say create a function using STO. Your using STO function should have no parameters. Inside the function body, it should print a string to the console. This can be any string you want as long as it's not either this is the first line of synchronous code or this is the last line of synchronous code. Check your work to move on to the next step. Let's do that now. Let's run that. We do pass. 2 says, now let's invoke the setTimeout function. Remember, setTimeout has two parameters. Invoke setTimeout with your using STO function as the first argument and a number between 0 and 3000 as the second argument. Let's do that here. Let's check work. We do pass. 3 says, take a moment to predict the output of this program. Whenever you're ready, type nodeapp.js in the terminal and hit enter. See if the program's output in the terminal lines up with what you expected. So when we run this, the first thing that would happen is we would log, this is the first line of code in app.js. Then we have our const using STO function. Here we do setTimeout and we call that using STO, but it's after 1 second. As it says here, any synchronous code from the program will run. Any code in front of it in line will run. So that tells me that this log and this log will probably run before using STO will run. So I expect it to be at the end. And let's see if that happens. So we do get this is the first line, and we get this is the last line, and then we get our beep beep boop. So here we're further learning how to consume or use promises. As it's saying, we won't actually be creating these promises as much as we'll be handling these promises once they resolve or reject. As it says also, setTimeout works by taking two parameters, a callback function and a delay in milliseconds. We also learned that if you put, say, 1 second or 2 second delay, doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly 1 or 2 seconds, and that is because once the delay finishes, any synchronous code that was running needs to complete running before our asynchronous code will run. And we know that's true because JavaScript uses the event loop, which means after the delay, our code is added to a line of code waiting to be run. Before it can be run, any synchronous code from the program will run. Any code in front of our code will run. And then finally, our asynchronous code will run. As long as you guys are understanding that, you guys are getting the node setTimeout function, as well as understanding how this relates to promises. Make sure to practice this until it makes sense, and I'll see you in the next lesson.